You get it out.
How far from the
Not
city?
very well.
Your place?
75 miles.
It takes about an hour and a half.
All right.
I'm good with the.
So we need one more.
My estimates today.
Yeah.
Chodesh Torah, everybody, okay. All right, let's, nice. What happened to Zoom? Yes. Okay, thank you, Caroline. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. All right, Mishkan time. We're in Mishkan business. Mishkan. Those who want the English, it's on the other side. On the second side, the top side is the hieroglyphics, the Hebrew. We're learning Chassidus. We're going to be learning one or possibly more shtickles of Torah from the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, named Moshe Chaim Ephraim of Sedilikov, whose Torah we've been learning weekly at JTS with the conservative students of the rabbinical school. Well, thank you. You know that Eden and I met at the Firehouse Bar when I was in my 20s. Eden was a waitress, bartender, and I was a wayward Orthodox student working down the block at Garlic Bob's at the pizzeria.
And that means it was almost 10 years before I actually.
Oh, at least.
Oh, hey, Rabbi David, can you move the mic a little bit closer to you, please?
I'd be eating it if I moved it closer. You want that much closer? I mean, I'm literally on top of it, Carolyn. Really?
Yeah, sure. That works great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
It's a mott. Think of it as a mott.
It's a mott, exactly. Interesting. Okay, I don't really need this. All right. So let's learn. Now, I preface this by saying that the history of reading the Mishkan as an allegory is very early in the history of exegesis, right? So it's very early on. Certainly, Josephus is doing it. It's probably at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, the time of the actual standing of the sanctuary of the temple. We don't know. I mean, early on in mystical sources too, even before, let's say, Josephus, in the literature of the Merkavah, which dates around that, but maybe a little bit earlier, right? The temple is outside is seen as an allegory for the temple inside, right? And the correspondence between elements of the temple and, by extension, let's say the tabernacle, which is the proto-temple, the earlier temple, are seen as elements that can be related to the human body, can be related to abstract ideas like psychological or spiritual concepts. So the physical structure of the temple, and before that the Mishkan, are always seen as kind of very rich, fertile soil for us to think about things other than the temple and the tabernacle as an actual structure, right?
That's what happens at architecture school.
At architecture school, I'm sure. Just like in rabbinical school, they talk about all these things on the inside. But so it shouldn't surprise anyone that a Hasidic master who's living in the 19th century would apply the same principles, right, to the tabernacle. It would be seen as fertile soil for discussing spirituality or discussing inner states or inner qualities. So that's one. Two, it's very difficult to not discuss the architecture of the tabernacle with someone like Thomas each year. And so I honor our great architecture Rebbe, the Rebbe of building, the building Rebbe, and the mathematics. I've learned so much Torah from Thomas. Should give a course at Romemu on that, actually. You should give a class on sacred architecture.
I would love to if people would come.
No, I think you would have a lot of students. You've done a lot of good advertising for you. We trust you over the years. So I think that the proportionality of the tabernacle is a profoundly beautiful subject to study in and of itself. And as you said to me, wrote to me in a text a number of weeks ago when I talked about the word intensity and the word that the N and the M are interchangeable in Indo-European.
Yes.
That the temple which resides here by the side of the head and the temple, right? There's a connection.
It's the same.
It's the same.
Because it's the place of tension.
The place where tension is held. And so it would be lovely for you to teach that, but we're not going there necessarily today, although you might, you never know. But we're going to go in the direction of two Torahs from the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, both of which speak to different parts of the tabernacle, but also then apply it to Hasidus or spirituality. Okay? All good? Now, third point is that I always say this, and I don't want to teach it, I just want to say it. Like the tabernacle comes out of nowhere. And so I just like to attune ourselves when we're reading. I hope people are reading try to read the Parsha during the week, or at least to skim it at some point. It's just to keep up to like, oh, where are we in the Exodus? We're in Exodus, we're in Leviticus. Oh, we're at the tabernacle, chapter 25 of the book of Exodus. So from chapter 25 of Shemot until chapter 40, which is the end of the book, we're basically in tabernacle, right? We're in the tabernacle. But just to give us a sense of where we are in the arc of our flow in the Torah, we were just at Sinai, and we were really at Sinai. Like the last two portions were really Sinaitic, right? You know, Jethro chapters 19, 20, right in there, 18, 19, 20. Essentially, we're standing at the mountain. The sea is split. We had a war. We were thirsty. We got water. We complained. And then we arrived at Sinai, and the most important moment in the Torah happens. It's the fulcrum of the whole Torah, arguably, like all of Genesis leading up to receiving God's voice at Sinai. And then even another parsha, another few chapters, 21, 22, 23, 24, those chapters are all about, okay, Sinai below. Like, you got the Decalogue, but like, how do you live it out in the world? Mishpatim. And all of a sudden, we're like waiting for what's next. And like, there's no introduction, there's no preface, here's an idea that I'd like to throw at you. It's just literally, it begins with, tell everybody to start giving towards the capital campaign. Right? Like, right? Huli Chuma, Zosa Chuma, Shetichumi, Zav, like here, gold, copper. We're thinking, I didn't see that one coming, right? So I think that the tabernacle is a great mystery. Like what its purpose is, we discuss this every year. Like there are two basic schools. The tabernacle is either a miniature Sinai that the text knows, but we don't, that we're leaving Sinai soon. And so you better take a little bit of Mount Sinai with you. And the tabernacle becomes like a miniature Sinai. There are three schools. Then there's another school that says that it was a response to the golden calf story, which is not in the text in chapter 25, but is later on in chapter 31. But that the text kind of skips over that and just picks it up. There are all kinds of reasons for that. Actually, that makes sense. And one of them, of course, is at the end of Parshat Mishpatim, is that Moses is up on the mountain for 40 days, 40 nights. That's how the text ends. And then we receive this divine utterance, which, by the way, is the first time this has been said since the Sinai moment. So it's strange. Text doesn't tell us that it comes down from the mountain. He was up on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Doesn't say that anything came down and told them about the tabernacle. None of that is there. It kind of lends credence to the idea that something is missing from the text a little bit. But the third idea also is that it's the creation of the world. That that the tabernacle is the recreation of the world. And in the post-Sinai world, we needed, right, human beings to create the world. Just as God created the world in chapter 1 of the book of Genesis, the tabernacle is a microcosm. These are not mutually exclusive, by the way. All three of these can be operative. There's a lot of text in the tabernacle story that is very first chapter of Genesis and second chapter of Genesis language. And that's that's a beautiful idea that in the post-Sinai world, we need a new world order, which is built by us. God commands us to say, make a portable universe, and that will be the place where you will enact a new world order. Now, all of those are in the mind of the Degel, as he's known, and so let's say hello to the Degel this morning, and he's going to be darshaning, he's going to be expounding upon a verse in chapter 26, where we are told to make beams, B-E-A-M-S, beams, or boards. They're beams, call them boards, but they're vertical columns. 100 of them exist in the tabernacle, right? 100 krashim. The word in Hebrew for a beam is a keresh, kuf, resh, shin, right? Kuf, resh, shin, a keresh, and there are 100 of them, which also connects, like the 100 beams and the 100 sockets for those beams, adanim, are connected to the 100 blessing practice that builds our daily tabernacle, like the 100 beams and the 100 blessings a day. And the beams have to be made of acacia wood, atzei shitim. So that's a word, that phrase, eitz is tree, right? Eitz, like eitz is, eitz is tree. And the word for an acacia wood is shitim. Not clear where that word comes from. Shita, shitim, it's like I'd say shitim. Now he's going to play off of the word in Hebrew for board is keresh. He's going to play with the letters. That's his Kabbalistic prerogative. He likes to play with letters. Of course, the world was created with letters, so it makes sense that in the microcosm of the universe, he's going to play around with letters. But it's not about the letters. It's about what he's trying to get at conceptually. It's like a device for him. And then the shitim word is also going to be used. The word eitz is also going to be playfully read midrashically. Eitz connects to another word in Hebrew called eitzah, which is advice. And so we'll see how conceptually he's going to be playful. It's beautiful. Ready? All right, buckle up. Here we go. Lehavin zeh. To understand this, I'm going to be reading the Hebrew and just loosely translating. I don't remember what ChatGPT wrote on the other side, but I hope it's accurate. Okay, you'll tell me. Lehavin zeh eich shehu noheg gam bezeh hazman. To understand how this verse can still be applicable at this moment, right? Isn't that a great question? You have huge portions of the Bible that are not obviously relevant for practice, right? By the way, that's also true of the rabbinic tradition. There are two seders, there are two orders of the Mishnah. Mishnah is 6 orders, and 2 of them, the last 2, Kochim and Taras, they have to do with the temple. So what do you do with a full third of the oral tradition is wrapped up with old technology that's not really useful in the next software update, the hardware. It's really new hardware. So it's a question. How does this verse about us here today? So B'kitzur Nimratz in a very concentrated form, Ki kibalti, I received it from Avi, my grandfather, meaning who? The Baal Shem Tov. Ki keresh hu Adam. That the beams are really human, or human beings are the beams, human beamings. Okay, a human being, right? So we beam. What does it mean that we are the beams, the keresh? Ulavin zeh ki osios keresh hu osios kesher. In order to understand this, we have to know that the letters of the word for beam, kuf, ka, resh, ra, shin, keresh, can be reorganized into the same letters for the word that is kesher. What is a kesher? Kesher is a knot or a connection. The whom merumaz, and this, let's say, this letter-based association, right? This ability to turn a beam into a connector, which itself signals the essence of why a beam is human, is an allusion to the possibility that ki al ha'adam shu ha'mekasher kol olamas umyachdam zeh. This is what a human being's capacity is to tie, to bind, to connect all of the worlds together and to unify them. In other words, multidimensional integration, right? Human beings can surf between multiple dimensional realities, right? That's our crowning jewel as thus far, the pinnacle of evolutionary consciousness. Thus far, we don't know. Could be AIs coming along. It could be Elon Musk. I don't know. Not. But it could be like, who we don't know, but we know that our capacity as waking beings, something about that capacity is connected to the word kesher. That you can unify and unite and connect and bind. It's also interesting just to think that not only is that intra-spiritually interesting, but it's also true of us interpersonally. Not only are we defined by our ability to unify worlds, but we are ourselves born from connection.
And kosher.
And being kosher. That's true. And being kosher. Different letter, but I like that. It sounds like it. I like it. Being a kosher person. Now there's a psychologist named Jessica Benjamin who wrote a book called The Bonds of Love. And she walked out the notion of intersubjective, that in contradistinction to other or attachment theory or whatever it might be, it was a little bit before full-blown attachment theory, she was already arguing very strongly that it's not like the mirroring that happens between the maternal or that ground of being and the child is one directional, it's intersubjective. And that there isn't a self the way that we understand it in the child, but the child is developing in the space of intersubjectivity, kind of like the Kruvim, like the cherubs, right, over the ark. So we are, the bonds of love, exactly. Yeah. So V'lachein, he says, therefore tzarich ha'adam lekasher atzmo. Therefore, a human being must bind themselves and their thoughts, tamid biboro, constantly with your Creator, with our Creator. Now, our binding ourselves with our Creator, being logged on to God, is itself the pathway that God herself becomes bound in all the worlds. Because God, the work of human beings is to unite and to bind the feminine and the masculine, or the divine transcendent and the divine immanent. In other words, to bring deep meaning and purpose that is transcendent into the banal, everyday, daily, hourly, weekly grind of what it is to be incarnate. And in that way, all the worlds unite. They become kosher, and they become united one to the other. God forbid, and if chalila hu mikasher, but if you bind yourself, umechaber atzmo, and tie yourself to el ashtos, to stupidity, vehevle olam, and to the vanities of the world. I don't know the way that Chat GPT says it, but Evle Olam, like the passing, impermanent, right, ephemeral, Gashmias, the things that are like, good coffee, all the things that are like here today and gone tomorrow. She'ein lem kiyum, that they don't last, right? Like, dust in the wind. The things that have an end and they're limited. Like if you spend your whole life only with the limited, right? It's not the name of some clothing company, the limited. It's like, that's my life. I live in the limited. He says, in that moment you've bound yourself not to God, but to something else, to sheker. Chas v'shalom. Shel gamkein v'osios keresh. That the letters of beam can be made to spell the word, right, connection, and can also be used to spell the word sheker, lie, deceit. We know a lot about that these days, right? We're seeing lies in the most pugnacious way, lies that are so obviously lying, and you're like, it's shocking to the senses. It's shocking to the mind. to be told. I mean, it was one thing to say that the numbers at your inauguration were much bigger than the actual facts on the ground, which was the beginning, the first salvo in office back in 2017. It was like, we were all there, we watched, we have footage, but now we're being like, it's shocking. It comes at you with such force. It's almost blinding in its head spinning. Sheker, you become bound to the word sheker. You're no longer a connector, but you're a liar. And that same word that is the beam, which is the very capacity of the tabernacles of the holiest space, it gives it its form. It delineates it, right? Like in other words, the limited, the line that is the boundary of the sacred space is held together by whether or not it's a connecting place or it's a place of lying. And he connects it to human beings, but it's also functionally that, like that you need the beams to delineate the holy space. And this is where when I think about that, I think about this. I don't know where I heard it. I don't know if it's true. Someone could check it. But someone once said in the name of somebody named Gregory Bateson, who I think was a scientist and biologist, but he was Margaret Mead's husband.
Psychiatrist.
What?
He did
Psychiatrist.
He did work on family therapy.
Family therapy, Gregory Bateson. So didn't he say? I think I heard him once say that we are not skin encapsulated egos. I think that was a phrase. Skin encapsulated egos. That the skin, isn't that great? It's so memorable. Skin encapsulated egos. Like the skin is not the boundary. That the skin is, of course, a boundary, but it depends on how. If you see it as a rigid boundary, if you see it as a place, or do you see it as a place of connection? Skin is actually teeming with like, we need to be touched, we need to touch others appropriately, of course, and with permission, but that the skin is also the locus of it's the place where outside, inside meet, and how rigid is that place? Is it a keresh, right? Thanks, Jay. Or is it is it a place of kesher, or a place of sheker, right? Is it a place where lies, like that's all you are, or that's all there is? Let's finish this and then we'll double back and see how it lands, okay? So he says, V'zeu masha amar Avi Avi. This is what my grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, meant. He also said, V'sartem v'avatem elohim achirim, that it says in the Torah that you will turn away and serve alien gods or foreign gods. Ki techev kishesar atzmam minadveikut v'ikashrut ha'emes b'borei yitbarach azai oved elohim achirim yichashev shenizkasher behem shehem b'chinas sheker. So the Baal Shem Tov read the verse that you will turn away and then serve other gods, not as that you will turn away and then serving other gods, but by turning away from connection, immediately that is, now you're in a place of confusion and deceit. In other words, doesn't read it as predictive, but as stages. As soon as you turn away, Visartem, you turned away? Okay, fine. You're no longer connected to that place. All kinds of other half-truths might come forward and begin to lead you into a place of confusion, of ignorance. So he says that, he says, V'yadua she'adam nivra, that human beings were created, it is known that human beings were created b'tov v'ra, with good and evil. Right? That's that little acronym there, tov v'ra. V'yesh lefanav shnei b'chinos, that each of us has two qualities that we have available to us, as it says in the Torah, Ei natati lefanecha tatov, u'bacharta b'chayim. Like he quotes the verse later on in the book of Deuteronomy, behold, God says, I place before you good and evil, right? Life and death, choose life. Choose life. V'atachlis, and the end, and the ha'ikar hu she'yishtadel b'kashut kol ha'dvarim l'shoshan, v'lasot me'ra shebehen tov, al dat sur me'ra v'asei tov. He says that our entire work in this world is to connect all things to their shoresh, to their root. all things to their root. Even things that seem at face value to be evil, have at their core something potentially that can be elevated for the sake of good. V'asei atov min hara. Right? From the thing that is not so good, make it good, make good, bring out good. And in order to understand this, he says, Ki kol b'chinat ra b'shoshahu tov. Says all things that seem to be evil have at their roots in their shoresh something good. For example, drinking and eating and sex. Kishu medabek atzmo, when you use those things for the sake of illumination and for the sake of spirituality. He says, through working that you lift up the holy sparks that are in the food or in the drink, by connecting them to aliveness or doing it with consciousness or with love or connection, right? Also, when you partner, when you make love, he says, you create all kinds of other unions above, and you have children that are righteous children. God forbid, if you're not doing it in a way that is full of a kind of connection to spirituality, then you can have the opposites. Azai vayishman yishurun vayivat. He says, he quotes the verse again in the book of Azinu that Jeshurun became fat and they rebelled, meaning that, when you're connected to the world of form overly, it can make you nauseous. You can become sickened by sensory pleasures, and it lead you in a really not good direction. And the Yetzer Hara misgarbo v'day l'chacham. It's okay, and it can only exacerbate a kind of sickness unto death. You can become so completely consumed with the world of form that you forget in some way to connect it to something in your spiritual life. And then he says, "V'zeu ezehu chacham alomedi kol adam." He says, this is the meaning of our sages who said, who is the wise person? The one who learns from everyone, which means, right? Kasher shamati bezeh me'anshe kodesh, as I heard from holy people on this verse that were around my grandfather. In other words, there's a well-known in the circle of my grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. There were holy people who said on this verse, on this teaching rather from the tradition that you are a wise person that you can learn from everybody. It means afilu min ha-Yetzer Hara yesh lilmod mimenu. That it didn't just mean that you learn from everybody, but you can even learn from your own evil inclination. Somebody can even learn from your evil inclination. Like everybody can be a teacher, including your own negative habits, your own fill in the blank, right? Your own devil on your shoulder. Like you have to be a student of everything, including the things that you think are not worthy. Like there's no cancel culture. There are no banned books in the mind of the righteous people who are around the Baal Shem Tov. Like they're like, we're going to learn from that, and we're going to learn from that. Even from that impulse, I'm going to learn something. Like everything was curious to them. They wanted to learn something from everybody. Pretty radical teaching, right? There are many paths when it comes to serving God that emerge from that teaching. And through this path, you can lift all evil to good. And in that method of Tantra, this is so Buddhist third school, this is like, whoop, you can turn even the most judgy, critical, negative voice into a voice of compassion and love. You can soften even to listen to that little bugger. And this is something that is alluded to in the verse that you are to make beams for the tabernacle. Hainu. This is the meaning of the beams for the tabernacle is make a space for me that I might dwell within you literally. Says you want to know how you make yourself into a sanctuary that I might dwell within? Become a connector. Become someone who's a human being. Like you are the one who connects things together. You connect yourself to God, and then you connect all of your actions also to that point of divinity in all that you do, in your interactions with your wife, your child, your family, in the way you go to the bathroom, the way that you take a shower, the way that you comb your hair, in the way that you wake up in the morning, go to bed at night, right? to bring mindfulness and an open heart to learning from your own mistakes, from your own, your own detours. Like these are the paths, the way God dwells within you, he says. Even when you're involved in all these things in the world that look like they could be potentially not, for the sake of the holy, make a connection to the root. And he said, now let's get back to the acacia wood that is made of this trees of shittim. Because now we understand the keresh is like the keresh, the beam is either kesher or sheker. But what's with the making them of atzei shittim, of trees of shittim wood? Hainu atzei lashon eitzot. Says eitza, the word eitz, which is tree, can also be playfully read as an eitza, which is advice. Eitza tova is good advice. So lashon hu mispar satan Rahman al-Itzlan, the word shittim in Hebrew is the same numerical value as the word for Satan. Like, they were just thinking about that. He was probably, I don't know where, he was thinking about that. Right? You look at it, it's the same letters. It's the same number, rather. Right? It's 359. Osam hadram shehem afilu mitzara satan, he said, take advice even from the satanic. Or let's say it a little bit less intensely, be inspired even from those things in your life that could potentially be dangerous, as it were, but that hold tremendous charge and possibility in cultivating them, in knowing how to handle them, knowing how to be with them, right? The negative, the difficult, right? He says that's what it means to build it from the wood of acacia. Here means even from the advice of that which is, difficult. You could, in other sources, it said the word shittim is from shtus, the word stupidity, right? Even from the stupid, you can also get advice. And that's what it means that they're standing. Atzei shittim odim, they were standing trees, meaning not cut wood, but standing. You have to cut it yourself. Hainu, yelem kima, that's what gives it sustainability. V'aliyah, and it'll lift them up. As it says, Vayakam Asadeh de Avram, Ainu b'shvil shaya Avram hayelokima v'aliyah, gamken kan aper shemalo umekim afilu b'chinas Rashi. Okay, and so on and so on. Okay, this is the end of his piece.
Was he writing for a general audience? Was this a transcribed sermon?
Yes, this is a transcribed sermon. He actually, this is a sermon that he gave on Parshat Shema. Okay.
And it's probably,
Let's open it up.
He probably didn't write it either.
No, students wrote it, but
Students,
it's
that's
likely
why
that he also had a
it's
chance to take a look at it.
Yeah.
So the upshot of this teaching from the Dagel, and then we'll open it up to we'll go to the Zoom, we'll go to Jay and then Ronen. The upshot of this beautiful teaching is, like, let's just extract his teaching, right? Like, his teaching is the Mishkan, the tabernacle is allegorical in this moment. It's an allegory. One piece of it, the beams are talking about, right, what it is to be a human being based on the teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. We are all beams. And just as the beam is made up of the letters Keresh, we humans can transform our beaminess into either the two forms of the same letters. Kesher, to connect, or Sheker, to lie. And we could do it in any minute. We could do it constantly. It's kind of like the two parts of every moment have these two pieces, Sheker, Kesher, Sheker, Kesher. And that he then brings like that teaching into a broader teaching that is found everywhere in Chassidut, which is there is nothing in the world that can't teach us something if we are great enough students, if we bring our hearts to it, including the things in our lives, especially the things in our lives that seem to be from might lead towards a forgetting of the kesher and more like sheker based. Like you could become a toothbrusher all the time, or eater all the time, whatever it is. But like he says, no, those are the places where we have to transform sheker into kesher, from lies to connection, to using it as a way of serving God, serving the world in some way. And then it's a broader teaching about the hopeful teaching of the tradition, which is also slightly problematic, which is that in the mind of the Hasidic masters, based on Kabbalah, which is earlier, but still in Hasidut, there is nothing in the world that can't be elevated and that can't be a teacher. Now, it gets, obviously, whenever you say that to people, they then go to the worst case scenario and they make it like, really? And they like, really? From Hamas, God forbid, like, really? So again, I want to avoid the extreme, like I think all positions of ontology break down under deep scrutiny when you try to make some absolute statement about the way it always is or whatever it be. I think that's true in almost every system that I've seen. But it's a beautiful, like a teacher saying to you, hey, I'm not going to tell you can always do this, but a lot of the times when you do seek to do that in most of your life, it can actually be a beautiful way to live in the world and give it meaning. We'll stop there. We'll go to the Zoom and then come back into the room. Okay. Reb J, good morning, Shabbos.
Shabbos, there's so much here, and I'm just formulating something, and I don't know how articulate I could be, but this notion of connection and lies, lies can be false beams, right? They can appear as connectors, and it seems to me this Baal Shem Tov's, his quoting of Baal Shem Tov's of durotomy, and the whole notion of turning, and it's also a question of what do you turn to and what do you turn away from? And it kind of also connects to me with the notion of tshuva, because tshuva, you have to turn. It's a return, but you have to turn. And when you turn, you have to let go. You can't hold on to something and make a complete turn. You have to let go. So somehow, to me, I'm trying to make connections, if you will, hopefully not, hopefully truthful ones, among these various notions of what you're turning to and away from, what the basis of your connection is. I think that's important. The substance of the basis of the connection is very important.
It's so Bashir. This is like every week this happens where I'm talking to somebody about something very intensely, and then a student or someone else in the community will say something, and it's almost exactly what I was talking about with somebody. And so I was on the phone yesterday with somebody, a dear friend, who years ago had an idea. She's brilliant, and she wanted years ago to create a movement around the phrase "on the hook," being on the hook. And I had just spoken about that recently when she talked to me about it, because the letter in Hebrew for hook, the word in Hebrew is a vav. It's in the Mishkan, and a vav is also a letter. So a vav is a word, which means to hook. In the Mishkan, the vave are the hooks that held the curtains together. And vav, as you know, is the sixth letter, and it has the shape, orthographically, of a hook. And I was talking to her about how the vav is a connector. It connects what came before to what comes next in grammatical form. When you place it as a prefix in front of a Hebrew word, it connects. It's additional. It's and. So vav is both and. It's connection. And it was on the hook. We were talking about the whole phenomenon of being on the hook. And as it relates to creating a shared community, when you're on the hook, it means that you're responsible. And so she's calling me yesterday and she says, I have a whole new movement because that, she did that, it's working. She says, I want to now in this moment to talk about the word turn. So she says to me yesterday about the word turn, she said, you gave a teaching, and I was taking notes on it years ago about turning. And I have an acronym for turning. It means like tune in, and then the U I forgot, but then the R and the N, and she's got a whole platform that she's going to launch, and it's about, it's your turn, it's our turn, make the turn, you turn, all this playing on the word turning, returning. And so I gave over the teaching about turning, and I told her about this, there's a teaching in Pirkei Avot in the ethics of the fathers, of our ancestors, that says that everybody has a sha'ah, everybody has an hour. But the Hebrew word for hour, sha'ah, appears in a biblical form not only as hour, but as turning, as in the story of Cain and Abel. That in Cain and Abel's story, God does not turn towards Cain's gift, and that's called the El Minchato Lo Sha'ah. God did not turn towards Cain's gift. And so one Rebbe said that every person has their hour, everybody has their sha'ah, also means everybody has their moment in time when they turn. And it then brought me to talking about the story of Moshe turning to see the burning bush. And the word there, asura na ve'er'eh, I will turn to see it, it's the same word as in the Deuteronomy text that you, Jay, you were quoting, vesartim, and you will turn aside. And so, yeah, it has a lot to do with a moment where people are placed with a choice and they turn from one choice to another. It's a moral dilemma. It's a fork in the road. It's a worker now in the government who's being put into an impossible situation to have to make a turn towards their highest integrity. It's moments of turning towards our neighbors instead of turning away from them. It's turning towards the truth. And it's very much a part of this piece, Jay. And I think I love what you said, because I think that the beams he's playing off of a theme in spiritual literature where the thing and its opposite are often in the very same place, right? The thing and its opposite. And that it's not like there are it's not clear that, where are the beams of deceit? Are they next to the beams of connection? No, they're the same beam. Depending on which, it's like the Heisenberg's, like, is it a particle? Is it a wave? What is it? It depends on where you're standing. At any moment, you can turn it. You can change it. Like, you can realize, I'm in the deceit now, and now I'm going to change my position. I'm going to be more honest. I'm going to be, and what gives us that strength is really, I don't know. It's also grace. I don't know. Some people have a stronger compass when it comes to this. Some people have higher immunity to lies than others. Some people are more easily taken in by it. It can be ambition. It can be all kinds of things, right? But it's something to pray for. Is like to pray for the ability to make that turn. That might be the most powerful spiritual capacity that we have. Is that, I remember once saying that when Romemu had an office on the 5th floor walk up, it was like every person that walked up to the office was out of breath, right? You couldn't, and we didn't even invite people to come up to the 5th floor if we knew that it might be dangerous for them, Don't come to our office, you might not leave. But I remember that when I first took the apartment, it would take me like a good 2 or 3 minutes to catch my breath easily. Like I'd still be heaving like 3 minutes later. And over time, I caught my breath more quickly. And that aerobic capacity to like find your breath in your footing is really a great spiritual strength. It's like people lose their footing, they lose their breath. They sometimes will find themselves not being fully in their integrity. And then they find it, and that's tshuva. And that's what I think, Jay, you were speaking to, is the ability to find the beam of connection as quickly as possible. I think it's beautiful that you brought us to tshuva. I really like that a lot. Okay. Thank you, Jay. 1 second, Dora, I want to just honor Ronen, and then can you hold your thought, because I really want to hear. So, okay, Ronen, and then I'm gonna.
I think the idea of converting object like keresh into something that has meaning, like universal meaning, like kesher or sheker, is very interesting. It's like it bring to mind like a native Indian culture, that you can turn stone into something spiritual. So that's one thing that is very striking about this kind of like a wordplay, because you take object and you turn it into a verb, you turn it into something that is actually has meaning and has a capacity for action. So I thought that was a concept. Number two, the idea that they use keresh or atzeh shita, which is basically very cheap material. In matter of fact, keresh in modern Hebrew means just cheap piece of wood. It doesn't mean even a column. So I think the idea of taking very humble material and turning it into this type of meaningful discussion, I think is very, to me, it's very interesting. I never thought about this kind of like way that can be so powerful, actually.
Yeah. So I said last night in the sermon I gave over at the Y, that one of the remarkable pieces of the tabernacle, just on a simple level, is that it was made up of radically beautiful things and very simple things. Like you had, gold and goat's hair. you have beautiful stones, and you have, wood chip, like stuff that you buy at IKEA. and that it's the ability to hold together extremes in tension in the temple was really part of the beauty of the temple, and it later became also allegorized to what it means to be a part of a body politic or a family or a community. Communities are made up of very, very diverse individuals, and the strength of the temple is its tension, not its weakness. The strength of the temple is its tensile, like its capacity to hold all these things together and use them in service of the holy. Like the whole, the temple is not made up of the most expensive wood, and it has all of these pieces together because all of them are valuable in the temple. And that's why the capital campaign starts with everybody whose heart wanted to bring something, and everybody did, because everybody did have something to bring. And so I just wanted to thank you also for, and the first point you made is also important, because according to our tradition, and we don't have to buy into it, but they did, so we understand them when we understand this, is that the Hebrew language is itself a mystery, and it holds secrets. And so whether we don't have to believe in its magical ability, we don't have to believe that somehow changing the letters will actually change reality, but for them it was a portal into something. And that itself is also a teaching, that they look to find meaning even in simple words like keresh, right? They found some deep principle that you, looking at the story of the tabernacle, you're thinking, okay, what are they going to do with this? And before you know it, you have something, a beautiful teaching like this. Okay, I'm going to go into the room, Dvorah.
It's almost starting to sound like the very instincts we might have.
Hi, can you move into the mic more, please? Thank you.
So it's almost sounding like if our very instincts that we do have, we should do the opposite. That would be our strength.
The opposite of our instincts.
Yes.
That our
Make
instincts.
that decision.
I see.
At that point, do exactly the opposite, and that will be the source of your strength.
The George Costanza.
Yeah, the George Costanza approach, exactly. Well said. I do want to say, I don't know if I would want, again, to call such a clear principle all the time. I think that we should have a class on instinct at some point about the different teachings on gut and whether to trust your gut or not. There's a very big question on trusting the gut in spiritual teachings and in psychology as we understand it today. Like, I can go in both directions here. Sometimes our gut is telling us exactly the truth, and very frustratingly, often our gut is wrong. And we're living in an age of decided, ambivalence would be the wrong word, antagonism towards expertise, where anybody can open up a camera and anybody can weigh in on any manner of things, especially the most complex of which, and say, but Dafka, because I don't have expertise, I deserve to have an opinion on it. And so I'm nervous about your teaching Dvorah in the absolute, but I'm also very aware of how precise it is, often when changing a habit pattern, that it's not the first thought that is usually trustworthy, but the second one in areas where we are habitual. That the habit is the first thought, and it's that habit that needs to be interrogated and have some space around it to say, I'm not sure if you're telling me a sheker. Let me check in and find the kesher, right? And so I think it's a very good point. Before we go to Thomas, I just want to say, speaking of twins, and Thomas is a twin, and I'm a twin, and his name Tom comes from twin, from Ta'om. Something about the entering into the month of Adar, which is today, and it's Rosh Chodesh Adar. And in our tradition, Adar as a month represents the ability to hold two things together at once that are not on the surface, but are, and might be opposite, but actually are held together, like the two fish of the Pisces symbol that are going in opposite directions, which Adar is the month of Pisces. And so it represents Keresh and Sheker together in a beautiful way. And the principal teaching, another teaching that I wanted to go to today, but it was going to be way too long, is from the Mori Naim, from the Chernobler, who speaks about, like, the Midrash that says that the reason why Purim takes place in the month of Adar is because, according to the legend, the Haman, who is the evil, the nemesis, he's the evil protagonist, he is the antagonist. He is convinced that Adar is a very bad month for the Jews because Moshe dies in the month of Adar, right? There's a tradition that says that Moshe dies in the month of Adar on Zayin Adar, on the 7th day of Adar. And then the legend says that What Haman didn't know that it was that Moshe was also born on the very same day that he died. And that this is a fulfillment of the verse that says that God fulfills the days of the righteous, meaning he died on the same day that he was born, like a complete circle, like a circle, like a Ouroboros, right? He was born on the day that he dies. His life was complete. And so it was this mistake on Haman's part which led to him to choose Adar as the month. But what he doesn't know, of course, is that Adar is all about emerging surprises and things that were not visible, right? So he didn't know that Moshe was born on the same day. Okay, Adar is the month that can become two. It's not one. It's the only month that can become what's called pregnant, right? It's called a pregnant month, right? It's a pregnant year, rather. Meaning
It's double.
it's doubled. It has a twin, right? It's the only month that from 1, 2 can come, and it's really, right? It's really 1, but it's 2. It's 1, but it's 2, and it holds those opposites, as it were, together. Moshe's death and birth on the same place, the Keresh and the Sheker together, the Kesher and the Sheker together, and we were talking about turning with Jay, with the ear. It's also, I say this every year, that I think that this was the essence of Moshe, and his deep truth was that it takes one turn and you turn death to life. And that's perfectly represented as the people of the door, which is my architecture teaching every day, every week, is that at the root of the word mezuzah is zaz, to move. It's 2 Zions, Zion and Zion. Zion, zaz, to move. And I think it's alluding to the 2 Zions, Moshe's birth on the Zion of Adar and Moshe's death on the Zion of Adar. And that ultimately the mystery of the mezuzah is death and life are 1 step away. It's not even 2, maybe. It's just 1 turn. You walk out the door or you walk back in the house. And that made all the difference. And that Haman didn't get that, as it were. Haman didn't realize, in the very same place where there is sheker, lies can also become a place of deep connection. And that's what this Hasidic master is trying to say, is don't give up, right? Don't give up on your ability to make a different choice, to make a different turn, to make a new habit pattern. Thomas.
So briefly, but I'm itching to tell you 2 fun facts from architecture.
We love your fun facts. We do.
They really are fun. They're solemn facts, but they're fun. So architecture too has its own version of attachment theory, which is tectonics, which is how is everything attached to everything else? How does everything connect to everything else? So is it a nail through wood? Is it the weld through steel? Is it just the mortar between stones? How is everything held together? How does everything connect? So in architecture, that's called tectonics. And so a tensile structure, like a tent, which is generally more elevated, has its own tectonic of stretching and reaching and becoming thin. But then, how can one thing also have its opposite? Also in the Mishkan, we have these boards, we have these beams. Interestingly, a beam is also itself in its opposite, because the word beam can mean a post or a rafter, right? The vertical thing and the horizontal thing. So both are beams, but one is a post and one is a rafter. In tectonics, the type of construction that involves posts and rafters, often wood, because wood is strong in compression and tension, that type of construction is called trabeated construction, trabeation. It's a very fancy word. So it means basically anything with beams, posts and rafters. This word trabeation, if you trace it around, it's the same as tabernacle. The trabe is the tab, right? It's this, and amazingly, so we also have it in table, right? Because a table is a post and a rafter, right? We also have it in tabulation when you're doing math, because you're literally putting numbers into columns, right? Into posts and into beams, things that go vertically and horizontally. So it's an amazing trabeation, tabernacle. Tavern is the same, a bar is a place of shelter. Taberna, tabernacle. So the most holy and the most humble is the same place, right? It's a great word. But trabeated construction, tabernacled construction. The thing that is beautiful about it is that the meaning of that word doesn't mean one thing rests on another, which is, kind of what it means tectonically, structurally. If you go all the way back, it means dwelling. Tab is dwelling place. It's where you dwell. This very specifically has this domestic, sheltering, dwelling kind of thing. So there's no dwelling without tabulating or tabernacling or tabling or so it doesn't refer to a structural event, it refers to this social event of dwelling. So the fact that the beams have to be there, trabeated construction has to be there, means that dwelling is being invited. So if it was just the tent, you might not get the dwelling. You might not be able to dwell among each other, right? So it's really important that the beams are there, even though we love the tensile and the temple and that other tectonic, which is about reaching, and the post and the rafter are about something else. They're about dwelling. Second fun fact. It's faster. I promise you it's faster. But again, the thing and its opposite in the same place, right? What an amazing paradox it is that the very same word we use for that heavy, solid, solemn object, the post, right? The pillar. It's the same word we use for the light that comes from that fixture, right? The beam and the beam of light, human beamings, the beaming smile, the radiating energy, the directed force of the sunbeam, the moonbeam, the laser beam, right? The light. Why? Why do we use the same word for one thing, and in a way it's opposite, right? The most ephemeral, delicate, mysterious emanation is the same as this solid, heavy, sober, post. Unlike every other mystery in the world, this one has an exact answer that it's one of my funnest facts in architecture. There was a guy in the year 764 who has a name almost as good as the Hasidic masters. His name was the Venerable Bede. And bead, there's a pun on a jewel, right? A diamond, he was the diamond. And he was a monk. He was a Catholic monk in the north of England. You can think of him he's one of those little dudes at the manuscript with the fire and the cat. And the Venerable Bede was trying, years before the King James translation and everything, he was fascinated with the book of Exodus, and he was trying to get it into the version of English in the 8th century. And he came across the pillar of fire in Exodus, the pillar of fire, the column of fire. And there was no word in English for this laser beam, this moonbeam, this sunbeam, this emanation of light between the heavens and the earth, between the ground and the sky. And he's like, what word do I have that describes this illuminating force, this directed force of heat and light? And he's like, beam, a wooden beam, a dwelling beam, a rafter and a post. And so necessary was this word beam in English that there's one guy who decided to use the word for the opposite, right? The word for the wooden post to mean a ray of light. That's how we have beam. It's from this one guy, the Venerable Bede, 764. Some questions have answers, and that's why it's a sunbeam and a rafter.
So there are two people online that I want to, one now that I wanted to get to, but I wanted to just comment back to Jay's point about turning and about tshuva. I wonder if there's an etymological connection between tab and its meaning of dwelling or indwelling with the word shav, because t and shin are interchangeable often in Hebrew and Aramaic, right? And the b of tab and the bet or vet of shav, which means to sit or to dwell, and also the root of to turn, right? Or to return, lashuv. It's sounds like tab to me. So I'm curious about that. Wow, so much to say on that, but so much to say about the Dalid and the doorpost is the place where that happens, right? The mezuzah takes place on the very one of the beams, right? That the teaching of that happens
on
also on the post, and wow, I had a lot in it, but I want to honor David and then Miriam and then we'll see if we close at some point, which maybe just learn for the rest of the morning, which is also fine. Okay, go ahead, David.
I hate to follow Thomas. It's a tough act to follow. I just want to interject. I saw a few weeks ago a play, a deeply Jewish play called Redwood. I'm not necessarily pardon me?
With Edith Merzel, isn't that?
Yes, yeah. It's a very Jewish play. There's even a song in there, Tikkun Olam. And I'm not necessarily recommending the play. It's a musical, but you learn a lot about redwoods. And one of the most interesting things that I just thought was apropos to an earlier discussion was that redwood trees, the oldest living things on Earth, these majestic trees, are their roots are only 5 or 6 feet deep, and they grow in groves and the reason why they live so long and it's all about connection. They're all connected to one another, and that's their secret. So I just thought that would be a fun thing to throw out.
That's great.
Attachment theory.
Yeah, attachment. I love it. Aspen trees too, deep roots. Miriam.
Koach, Shabbat Shalom. I love your teaching about how the Mishkan is made out of beautiful things like gold as well as cheap things, but I rebel against the idea that gold is more intrinsically valuable than goat hair. And maybe that's why it's also Shabbat Shekalim, where everybody gives a half shekel, no matter how rich or poor they are, to kind of democratize that.
Great. I love democratizing is a good, like a really good endeavor at this moment. I invite all of us into that verb to democratize, and no use in getting into a debate about intrinsic value versus extrinsic value. I see the point. I think it's beautiful to imagine that when it comes to the ultimate value, which is purpose, that all things are created with a purpose, whatever their quote unquote intrinsic value is. I love that. And I just say that, so one last thing before we go. The word Adar, all of the names that we have for the months came up with us at the Talmud from Babylonia. And the word Adar is not a Hebrew word. It's, again, it came from Babel, it came from Babylonia. But it didn't stop the rabbis in the Talmud and then in all subsequent rabbinic literature to do midrash on the words or the names for the month. And the one of Adar, the play on the word Adar is very, very well known. The word Adar, again, not a Hebrew word, can be constructed in a number of ways. One of them is Aleph. It's 3 letters, Aleph, Dalet, Resh. It can be constructed as Aleph, Dar, right? Aleph means the one, the letter Aleph, but also it points to God as the one. Dar means to live or dwell in. And that teaching, the Aleph lives in Adar, is of course extremely complicated because